learn empathy. Empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's place and looking at things from their perspective and really understanding where they're coming from. And as a parent, if you can be empathetic, your world changes.
You're tuned in to Dadsplaining, a weekly chronicle of all the weirdest, messiest, grossest, and funniest parts of fatherhood, hosted by two first-time dads. I'm Jesse, and you don't hear Brandon's voice today. Brandon is home recuperating from being up all night with a crying baby. His son Noah did not get any sleep last night, which means Brandon and his wife Austin also did not get any sleep last night. So thoughts and prayers go out to the Spears family at home. But I'm going to be flying the plane solo today. And we've got a special guest on the show. We're going to be talking with Jason Kreidman. He's the founder and host of Dad University. It is both a podcast and a YouTube video series aimed at helping dads, especially new dads or expecting dads, with questions they have, things that you don't learn in school, things that maybe no one tells you because you just don't ask. So we're going to dig into a lot of stuff. Before we do, of course, if you have questions, stories, if you want to be on the show and talk to us, there are a number of ways you can reach us. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Search for Dadsplaining Podcast. We also have a Facebook group, Dadsplaining, a fatherhood group for dads to share tips, ask questions. It's also mom-friendly. And you can reach us by email at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. Before we get started, we ask this every week, but if you are enjoying this podcast, please do us a favor. Leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever platform you find your podcasts on. And do us a favor. Share us with other dads. You know, we sometimes as dads don't know what we don't know, and it helps to hear from other dads sharing the little tiny bit that they do know. So yeah, we're just going to dig right into this week's episode. We are talking live on the line with Jason Kreidman. He is, as I said before, the host of Dad University, and he is live on the phone with us right now. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Hey, good. It's a little early, but I'm doing well.
That's right. So it is 8 a.m. here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm recording, but it is 5 a.m. on the West Coast. Jason, where do you live?
So I'm in San Diego, California.
Sunny San Diego. Excellent.
So just a little over 5 a.m., but that's okay. I am an early person and I get up early, so I'm rare and ready to go.
That's awesome. I feel your pain. My wife and I just recently started taking classes at a local gym, so I had a 5 a.m. What they call flex core class this morning, and I'm feeling it too. So Jason reached out to us, and I checked out what he's got to offer, and you should too. Head over to YouTube after you're done listening to this episode and check out Dad University. Of course, that means Jason is a dad, and Jason, I want to hear a little bit about your dad experience. Who are you the father of?
Yeah, so I have a 9-year-old girl and a 11-year-old boy.
Uh-huh.
So I, obviously had gone through a lot of these early stages and just was struggling and had to figure something out. And that was kind of how Dad University was born, was just really from my own struggles and my own frustrations and looking for assistance and not really finding it. So that's kind of the basis of how Dad University began.
That's awesome. And how did it start out? Because I know that you have a strong following on YouTube, and you also have an audio version. Which came first?
So actually, the audio, the podcast I've been doing for almost 4.5, 5 years or so. We have 240 episodes or so.
All right.
And actually before that was a meetup group. That's actually how it started.
Oh, okay.
It was a meetup group, and I had done that for a couple of years and was fine. Just I had reached out and wanted to find other dads that had the same issues, that I was having. And so that's kind of how it began. Was a meetup group, and then I decided a coworker that I had been working with had done a podcast in marketing and said, "Gosh, you could consider a podcast." And so Alan, my co-host, we had worked together and just had really good rapport. And he was a dude. I mean, he wasn't married, didn't have kids, and so we came up with this name, Dudes to Dads. Mm-hmm. That was our original name of the podcast. And it just had just decided to do it and kept up with it weekly. And it was kind of, a lot of it was cathartic of just finding out things that I wanted to learn. And then I started learning and getting feedback from other guys. And then about, year and a half, almost 2 years, I said, maybe I should put this on video.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's kind of then how that evolved. And I started doing YouTube videos, and then it just kind of took off from there. And so, we don't sell anything. We're not trying to push anything other than just helping dads, explain some of the things that I've gone through, and give people some tips and advice on how they can, make their lives a little bit easier, a little bit richer, a little bit more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the goal. That's the goal of Dad University.
That's awesome. I think it's something that is really meaningful. When you find out that you're having a baby, oftentimes, at least kind of in my experience, there's a million books for the mom. There's What to Expect When You're Expecting and all of those iterations. And there are helpful books for dads, but I feel like there aren't as many. And maybe sometimes it's because dads just aren't buying them. We're the kind of guys that we don't read the instructions. We don't ask for directions. We like to tough it out. I got this. I can figure it out on the way. And sometimes what happens to us is the baby gets here and then we realize, oh, crap, we really don't know what we're doing. So I think it's awesome that you were able to kind of step out and start talking to people. And the Meetup group, I want to highlight because I think that's a really cool idea. I'm guessing that was through meetup.com.
Yeah, it was. And it was just a matter of time when I started, and unfortunately I had to stop. It was just a personal bandwidth issue. It's like I started making videos every week. I was doing the podcast every week. And so that kind of, I realized I could reach a lot more people by, as much as I love the in-person, we had really deep, meaningful conversations. As much as I wanted to continue to do that, it's just, wow, maybe I could reach more people in these other mediums. And so that's how that evolved.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that happens to a lot of us. I'm in the situation where I know my co-host, Brandon, who has a kid, and I have a few close friends who are dads. But, in today's busy world, like I get up, I go to work, I come home, I take care of the kid, and then I go to sleep. There's not much time for extracurricular socializing, which is why the internet is such a cool thing, and finding podcasts and finding video series, for dads that just don't have the time to get out to a daddy group,
For sure.
So now you've got the YouTube series. I've seen that a lot of the videos have sort of upwards of 20,000 views. So these are really things that are getting eaten up by dads, so the need is definitely out there. What kind of responses or comments have you been hearing from dads?
Yeah, well, it's funny. And as you gain an audience, you realize that all of these platforms are quite different, and so for sure, I'm finding YouTube as an example, there seems, because YouTube is more of a how-to. It is, people are looking for instruction. And they're often younger, and it's so the new dad space there is really thriving, and so people are swallowing that up. I haven't focused as much on like Facebook and the other platforms. I will, and I'm going to get there. But they're just a little different, and so YouTube has worked really well for me. One, just because of my sort of instructional style. That's kind of how I learn best. I learn in okay, give me the 7 things that I need to do.
Yeah.
Give me and so that's how this was all created, was how can I learn best? And what is it that works for me? And certainly I have to adapt things as I get more popular, because I can see what works and what doesn't work. But, the good thing is my background is internet marketing. I was, I've been a consultant for 20 years. So having some knowledge in these areas of like what works, what doesn't work, how to analyze it, that's kind of where, that's what I come from. So it's exciting though. It's finding, the audience and understanding what the audience needs. And you had touched on earlier about, the books, the dad books. And the truth is there isn't as much demand for dad related product. And my background is search. So I'm a search expert. Yeah. And certainly the volume of search is not the same for dads. Now, that's not to say that it's not needed as much. It's just that search volume and understanding what people are actually looking for. And I think, you touched on a little bit of like dads asking for help.
Yeah.
It is something that they have a tendency to not ask for help. Like you said, hey, we got it, or, I can handle it.
Right.
And that's where, we're trying to also change the narrative for dads. Like, no, it's okay to need help.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to not know what you're doing and to, admit that.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're trying to come in.
That's awesome. And you were right on our freaking wavelength. Like that was kind of how we started the show out a couple years ago now. I was getting ready for the arrival of my son, and Brandon, his wife, Austin, was pregnant at the time, about 5 months behind us. And we just started talking about that because we didn't really know a lot of dads, and there weren't really a lot of books that were interesting to us, but we knew that there was a lot that we didn't know, and so what we wanted to do is kind of come on and each week kind of explore something that we don't know and try to learn a little bit about it and maybe share that with other people. And yeah, the responses we've got are kind of along those lines. They're a lot of times from expecting dads who are like,
yep.
There was just so much I didn't know. And now we're in the age of YouTube videos and podcasts where I don't have to raise my hand and feel like I'm embarrassing myself by admitting I don't know something. I can just go on the internet and Google it. And then there's these resources here,
right.
Which I think is kind of important because, it's something that I struggle with too. Like over the past few months, I've had a project on my to-do list to nail down plywood in my attic. And being a man, I kept telling myself, I can do this. I can figure it out. What's so hard about it? And each time I would get up there, I'd be like, oh, I didn't know that this pipe was here and I'm going to have to get around this. And eventually I just had to kind of give up and, call up my dad and say, hey, I have this project I need help with. What do I do?
Right.
And get the advice and figure it out. But it's a hurdle that we all, I think, struggle to get over sometimes.
Yeah, well, we make priorities. That's just part of who we are and what's important to us. For some people, getting up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym is not a priority.
Right.
For most people, it's not. It was funny. My wife and I were just talking the other day because we recently had some stuff done on the house. Well, my children are now 9 and 11, and we wanted to get this stuff done before the children were born.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking to a neighbor, and it was funny because we had sort of just let our stuff go, if you will. I don't want to say we were the eyesore of the neighborhood. We live in a nice neighborhood, but it was basically like, wow, your front yard is not really that nice. And like, wow, you have some stucco chipping on the front of your house.
Uh-huh.
And, it's these things that like, well, yeah, we'll get to it. We'll do it. And whether, financial and timing and all these things, it's like it just wasn't the priority.
Yeah.
And you sort of shift gears, but you have to give yourself the okay that you can't do everything.
Exactly.
And I talk about that a lot. And it's, you cannot be the perfect husband, the perfect dad, the perfect employee all at the same time.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. And so, every day is a new day,
mm-hmm.
and you might be able to say, you know what, today I was awesome as a dad. Like Brandon staying home, I was up all night, I was taking care of my kid.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? I may not be a perfect employee because I was a little late, or
uh-huh.
I haven't gone on a date with my wife in a long time, or and so all these things, and you sort of, a lot of people call it work-life balance. I've used the term work-life harmony.
Ooh.
Where the idea that all of these things have to work in harmony. And so it's not a balance. It's not, and certainly, yes, you have to give up sometimes some things for something else, but it's how can you make all of these things work together and just prioritize. And it kind of, it goes into some deeper, philosophy stuff, but that's some of the things we talk about too. It's, you can't be perfect all the time. And just like, I know moms struggle with this too,
mm-hmm.
that they want to be a perfect mom and they want to be the perfect wife, and and it's tough. You can't. And part of our channel and our resources is about, giving yourself the permission to fail, being okay, it's self-acceptance, and just doing what you can at your pace and understanding that, you're making that effort, and that's really, really important, and the different things that you can do for your kids and for your family and all of those things. And that the truth is, like you've just said from the beginning, is dads just don't get the resources. They don't get the help. They don't talk about it. They don't, they're just not as active, but I do see that shifting. I do. I think there is a shift. I think people are starting to be open and more open to it, the younger generation. And so that's what we're hoping.
That's awesome. I mean, I see it too, just with the fact that, we're not afraid to go online and look for help. And maybe that makes it easier. Maybe the fact that it's anonymous makes it a little bit easier. But I think I also see dads starting to overcome that pride of trying to do it all and being, like you said, the perfect husband, father, and employee all at the same time. We've touched on that in a couple of episodes about how I think after years of being in the working world, we kind of get a little bit of culture shock when we transition into fatherhood because, in the office, there's the leaderboard, you can check off that task list, you get the bonus, you get the raise. There are rewards and sort of benchmarks that you can hit so you're doing well. But at home with a kid, it's not really like that. You're just kind of day to day keeping the kid alive and keeping these sort of vague goals in mind. So you don't get the same sort of reward or exactly the instant gratification or appreciation that you might get at work. And you have to kind of rewire your brain to kind of figure out that, okay, it's okay to thrive at home where I may not be getting that sort of gratification versus at work where I can just dive in and pour myself into it and be a workaholic and really get the pat on the back for it. And one thing I've tried to drive home that I struggle with every day is if you can't succeed everywhere, like you said, but if you've got to fail somewhere, try and err on the side of failing at a job where you can always get another job rather than failing with your family. It's much harder to replace a family.
Right. No, it's a great point. And the reward is long-term. That really is, like I said, with my kids now being 9 and 11 and seeing the amount of work that my wife and I put in. And I don't think it's bad to say this, but when somebody says, wow, you have such good kids, it's not luck.
Yeah.
It is a tremendous amount of work. Now, when my children mess up or they do something, let's say they were mean to somebody, or that's also a reflection of me and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to take the good with the bad, but the long-term impact, and that's what we look at. So when somebody says, wow, your children speak so well, or they're so well behaved, or something, whatever it is that you value, that's where you start to, you get a little bit of that, oh yeah, that I did that. I was part of that,
Yeah.
I had a hand in them being polite to somebody when we were at the store, or that was, when they had manners, or when they were really helpful to a friend, yeah, we taught them that, that's the sort of stuff that's really rich. And you start to see them as individual human beings and really coming into their own and making those decisions. But don't get me wrong, we had, last night, it's, in the summer, and we're having issues with keeping some things clean, and so every day is a challenge and every day is interesting. And it was my wife's birthday yesterday. And so we went to the beach in the afternoon, and we were just sitting there reflecting as we are watching our kids play in the water and just saying, gosh, we are lucky, look at them. They're just, my son was being really nice to his sister, and, they were playing in the water, and feeling so much gratitude, having sort of this huge accumulation of effort and time. But we were saying, it's this is the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just, parenting is hard. I have a video just called just that, being a dad is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody now, being hard doesn't mean it's not worth it. It's absolutely worth it. So if somebody's thinking about having kids, I absolutely would say yes, but it certainly is not trivial, and it's not easy. And it's, to be a good parent and to be involved and make a lot of effort, that's not easy. But it's like anything. It's like your diet or your health or your work or anything else. It takes a lot of work.
Exactly.
And that's the part that you got to make the effort.
Yeah. It's not something that you can just kind of put on autopilot. I feel like 50 years ago, we have the image of Mad Men, Don Draper coming home from work and grabbing a drink, and then meanwhile his wife's over with the kids. It's something that the more you sort of lean into it, and yeah, it's hard, But you get over that pretty quickly because, you've done other things that are hard. You've sort of climbed up the ladder at work. You got all the way through school. That was hard. It wasn't something you could just put off to the side. It's worth it. You do get the rewards, and it's like you're saying, they're just more long-term. Like it's, now that your kids are at that 9 and 11 age, you're able to kind of look back and have the long view and be like, man, they're really growing up right. I feel like a lot of new dads, especially in those first few months, they're struggling to kind of see, although there's the love there, they're struggling to see, like, is this paying off? Like, this is really hard. I'm not sleeping at all. Am I doing a good job?
Right.
And
what's my reward?
Yeah. Sure. And you may not say that consciously because it almost sounds selfish when you say it out loud, but in the back of the mind, it's like, is this worth it? Is this paying off? And I don't know about Dad University, but so many of our listeners at Dadsplaining are new dads who are either about to have a baby or they've just had a baby. And so they're in that frenzied first 6 months, first year, trying to, A, just keep the kid alive, keep the kid from actively trying to kill itself, and then B, trying to figure out how to shape this sort of malleable dough into a good human being.
Right.
One question that I have for you, and I'm sure it's something you've answered several times with Dad University, for the new dads listening to this show right now, what, if you can, what would be the single most helpful piece of advice you could give them?
So I think learn empathy. For me, that was a new concept that I took parenting classes and got certified in parenting and teaching these classes. And one of the things that just hit me like a rock was understanding empathy. And empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's place and looking at things from their perspective and really understanding where they're coming from. And as a parent, if you can be empathetic, your world changes. The relationship with your wife or significant other changes for the better. The way that you approach your children changes for the better. Because think about it. I mean, I had a story that I tell where my daughter's 4 years old or so. She's going like her first day of kindergarten, and she can't find her shoes. And I'm yelling, I'm come on, we're late. What do you mean you can't find your shoes? And there was no empathy involved at all from my perspective. And so, of course, that got me crazy. It got her crazy. It got, my son's crying. I mean, everyone is a mess. We're trying to get to school. And if I just took a second and looked at it from my daughter's perspective, she's totally paranoid about going to school. It's overwhelming to be transitioning. It was like her first week or whatever. She is and to her, not finding her shoes was a huge deal. For me, not finding her shoes is not that big of a deal. I just get another pair of shoes.
Yeah.
I go. And I'm sitting there saying, we put the shoes on the rack every day. It's the same spot. How could you not know where your shoes are? We went through this whole thing.
Yeah.
And that to me was such a wake up when I learned empathy. And even as a newborn, you look at your newborn who's crying in the middle of the night and you're like, gosh, would you just stop? I can't believe they won't stop crying. Well,
oh yeah,
they're hungry
yeah.
or they're tired or they're trying to communicate. They're not trying to make your life hell. They are trying to communicate something, and we get upset because we can't solve it or whatever.
Yeah.
But I would say for me, empathy has been the number one tool. I almost say by far in all of the things. I've learned to have better communication with my wife and understanding if I come home from work and she happens, because she works too, but she comes home and she's upset at something and maybe she gets upset and yells or something.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with me.
Right.
And if I put myself in her spot, it's like, oh, wow, you had a rough day and something happened where, blah, 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 whatever. It totally shifts the way that I interact with her. I'm like, wow, you know what? I'm really sorry that you had a bad day. That sucks. Versus how could you talk to me like that? I don't deserve to be talked to. And you go into this, this battle. Those kinds of things it's amazing how much your just the positivity you can bring into the situation by just looking at something from someone else's perspective. And it goes for work, it goes for your friends, it goes for, or somebody honking at you on the freeway and yelling at you, or, oh wow, that person is probably having a bad day.
Exactly.
Like, that had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
And so I would say empathy. So for new dads, and existing dads, it is learn and really understand to put yourself in somebody else's position, and you will find, and you kind of let go of the ego, and you let go of a lot of that. That's what will reduce arguments, reduce stress. All kinds of things can happen from that.
That's awesome. I totally 100% agree. And, not only does it just feel better when all is said and done, but sometimes it's a quicker problem-solving tool. We've talked about this when toddlers throw tantrums. We got a lot of listeners who are in that stage. It's really easy to just get mad and just try and, grasp at straws to make this kid stop crying, or just leave this.
Yeah, you reason with them. Oh well, I would get over this. I'm not mad. I wouldn't be mad if I lost my toy.
Right, but then if you put yourself in that 2-year-old's brain and you realize that they want something or they don't want something, but not only are they not getting what they want, they don't even have the language to say what they want. So imagine you're in a foreign country and you don't know how to say what you want. You can't get it. That's extremely frustrating. That's the situation they're in. So they're trying to communicate, the same way that we communicate. They just don't have the words to do it. So that kind of compounds things. But if you're able to empathize and put yourself in their shoes, you find a quicker path. And because you can then do things that actually work. And it's like you said, that's not just a parenting thing. That happens with work. It can happen if you're having an argument with somebody, and instead of just venting and saying what you want to say, you stop and put yourself in their shoes, and then you say something constructive, something that they want to hear based on what they're asking for, even if they're not saying it directly. That is such a powerful thing. I mean, now that you're talking about it, I want to do an episode on empathy all on its own. So,
one of the biggest things as actually providing people value and instruction is when you're in a situation, you don't have to solve the problem. Like, if you came to me, let's say, we're out and we're friends, and you said, hey, Jason, I'm having this trouble with my wife. Here's what's going on. Simply me saying, wow, that must be really hard.
Yeah.
So all I'm doing is acknowledging it, or, and saying, wow, I can see how that could be hard. Or, and let's say, just say in a situation where you can't even see or understand that it's hard, you can at least say, you know what, I can see that really is frustrating for you. That's not you saying, admitting to your wife that you are wrong. That's just saying, I can see that this is a really big deal for you.
Yeah.
I see that. And that's what people want. Toddlers, spouses, everybody just wants to be heard. And that technique of just somebody's talking to you or coming to you, or even just in that situation, like you said, if it's a toddler who's whining and crying, you say, oh, I can totally, I want the toy too. I can see why you're upset. That makes sense. Or, oh, I know you don't want to leave the park. It's so upsetting when you're having fun and you want to leave that's hearing them. It's not saying, well, guess what? You get to stay for 10 minutes. Or, there's nothing around that. It's just you're acknowledging the feeling that they have, or the thought that they're, acting on. You're just acknowledging it.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's a healthy middle ground between standing your ground and giving in. Neither of those are going to get you anywhere. But if you kind of meet them in the middle, find that common ground, and then at least acknowledge what they're saying, whether or not you agree with it, you can build from there. I freaking love that. Like, I love where we're going with this.
Yeah. My wife and I learned one early on, and now it's kind of become somewhat of a joke. But like, when we say something to each other, we said, hey, thank you for telling. It was in a relationship retreat that we went to, and it was like, basically, thank you for telling me. I will take that into consideration. Now it's kind of a joke because like we make it, but it's basically like when one of us says something that the other person just doesn't either want to do or hear, or whatever, we just like, well, thank you for telling me. I will take that into consideration. and kind of along those same lines, it's like, you're not saying no, you're not saying yes, but, when somebody says, hey, take out the trash, you say, well, you know what? I hear you.
Yeah.
I will take that into consideration. Sometimes it doesn't work as well, but, so we'll use that as a joke, but at the same time, it's like, oh no, I hear what you're saying. Let me think about that.
Yeah.
And and you can use that at work. Someone's providing you an idea. Instead of shooting them down, you're saying, hey, that's really interesting. You know what? Let me think about that. Rather than saying, no, that sucked. Like, I don't like your idea.
Yeah.
It could be the same thing. You're not intending to use the idea or what the person said, but it's how you're communicating with them and how you're at least allowing them that input. And so for kids and parents, and for spouses, it's hearing the other person.
Exactly.
It's hearing them and understanding that.
Yeah, and it's something that, if you're a dad and you're getting this advice and you're struggling with it, you're thinking, oh, that sounds so soft and new agey. Like, it doesn't have to be strict formalistic language. It's just a mentality. It's just the idea of stepping in that other person's shoes and giving them a little bit of recognition that you hear them. Because, that's what you want to do. Even if you're not getting what you want at the end of the, argument or what have you, if you're at least being heard and if at least you're being understood, that goes a long way. So if you feel that way, obviously the other person's got to feel that way too.
Yeah. And I can tell you will get your way. That's how you become a master communicator is, it's not quite manipulation. I won't use that word. But you begin to understand, and it's actually much more powerful. And so whether it's at work or with your spouse or with your kids, or whatever, it's almost like a superpower, is you begin to get people to do the things that you want to do or listen to what you're saying. So that's the power of empathy.
Yep.
If I'm listening to my wife and really understanding where she's coming from, you better believe that she's going to start feeling better about me, and it's the same thing with my child. If I go through hundreds, if not thousands of episodes where I am empathetic with my children and they really believe and feel that Dad, wow, like he's understanding me. You better believe that I'm going to have a good relationship with them, or, that they're going to come to me with their problem or be able to talk to me because they know Dad's going to understand this.
Yep.
And my wife was excellent at empathy before I even knew what it was. And so, and I think maybe sometimes, women have that ability, whereas, something for me is I had to learn it.
Yeah.
I wasn't empathy out of the box. I didn't have empathy out of the box. It was, oh, wow, this is really powerful. Whether it was me just being selfish or just not understanding, I was always, how can I benefit from this? What's my, or no, I got to top them. I got to talk louder.
Yeah.
All of these things that we do as men is like, oh, wow, I could actually be more powerful by using these kinds of techniques, because that kind of resolves the situation or diffuses it. That's probably a better word. And it's powerful. It's really, really powerful.
Oh, yeah. So we're coming towards the end of the episode here, but before I let you go, Jason, I am curious, go back in your mind about 11 years when you were a new dad, if you can remember that far, because I know as dads, like our brains are just totally zonked. What was the best piece of advice that you got as a new dad?
My mother actually said, nothing is forever. I constantly remember that. And I remember as a new dad not getting sleep, the crying and the whining. My son, when he was born, he would cry and whine, and it turns out, he was uncomfortable. And so we learned how to put things on an angle. There was all kinds of benefits we could go into. And so I recalled my mom, because I was so upset, and she just said, it's not forever. And so that kind of stuck with me, meaning he's not going to be crying forever. You're not going to be losing sleep forever. The fact that he's not eating right now, like, that's not forever. And it lightened the weight a little bit of knowing that it's not like I'm not going to be in this challenge forever. It's a temporary thing. And when you're losing sleep and, you're even, hey, when's the last time that my wife and I got to spend time together? Or, or even had a desire to do that because you're so,
Yeah.
all of these things of saying, wow, like that's not going to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was a great piece of advice that sort of eased my mind a little bit back then.
Yeah.
That, just to have a little patience, and it's hard, but that was probably one of the best pieces of advice. It's not going to last forever. Don't drive yourself nuts thinking that you're going to be sleep deprived for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah.
My kids slept well pretty early on just because we were so routine. And I recall that first night when my son slept through the night, my wife and I woke up in the morning and like there was silence.
Yeah.
And we looked at each other and just couldn't believe that we had 5 or 6 hours of solid sleep. And that feeling of it was these, small little wins, and we just couldn't believe it. We're like, we think that stage is over,
Yeah.
It was this huge sigh of relief. And of course, it regresses back and then goes forward again. But, so I think that just probably that nothing lasts forever, and that, you can come out on the other side, and, it's not easy. It isn't. And you're there for the long haul. You have to bear sort of these difficulties that happen. And for me, the newborn phase wasn't the hard part. I think for me, my wife was also a labor and delivery nurse, so that certainly helps. But for me, I would say the 2-ish to 4, that the toddler and the whining and like that for me was the hardest stage.
Okay.
Because whether it's terrible twos and everything else.
Yeah.
Because they begin to think about stuff, and their movement, they have movement, they're on they walk around,
yeah.
All of those things were very stressful for me, and I wasn't empathetic. So I wasn't, at the time, I wasn't looking at the situations from my kid's perspective. I was looking at it from my perspective.
Yeah. Okay.
And that to me, I mean, if I could say, hey, would I do anything differently? That would have been it, is looking back and saying, wow, I wish so many situations I would have just looked at it from my child's perspective of wow, they are screaming, crying because they're uncomfortable or trying to say something, not because they're trying to ruin my life.
That's awesome. So develop that skill of empathy early. I think that's great advice. That's good advice for me to take to heart. I'm getting into those terrible twos now. My son is going to celebrate his 2nd birthday in November, and he's already kind of turning into everyone says 3-nager. He's a 2-nager. He's already developing that independence, wanting to do everything himself.
That. I haven't heard that.
Yeah. It's 13. There's 13 going on 30. I think there's also 2 or 3 going on 13.
Right.
That empathy, I think, is huge. So that's absolutely something I'm going to keep in mind. And Jason, on that awesome note, I think we're going to wrap this up. This has been awesome, incredibly helpful. I know that we've got a lot of dads listening to this that are going to get a lot out of it. That skill of empathy, I 110% agree with you. It is essential, not just to getting what you want, but to having some peace as a family, as a dad, and to leaving an impression on your kid, because that's a skill that they're going to have to develop, and they're going to have to get it from someone, and, just let it be you. So, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell us, where can our listeners find you? Where can we find Dad University?
So, I mean, on all the social channels of Dad University, our website is daduniversity.com, and we're revamping a lot of things there to provide, much more resources. And, just constantly, I mean, there's social, everything, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, it's all Dad University. So, they can find us everywhere.
That's awesome.
Everywhere that there's anywhere, wherever your favorite social hangout is, that's where we are.
Beautiful. How often do you guys do a podcast episode?
It's weekly. It's weekly. So we release a podcast every Tuesday, and then we have a new video every Thursday.
That's excellent. Hey, listeners, you've got a great weekly schedule. You get a new episode from Dadsplaining Monday, new episode from Dad University Tuesday, and catch the video on Thursday. You're set for the week.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Next week, Brandon is going to be back with us. We're going to talk about something fresh. This weekend at home, my wife and I are going to begin trying to potty train our son. He is finally getting to that age. So we'll probably dip into a little bit of that. So be sure to tune back in next Monday for that fun. And until next time, I'm Jesse. And once again, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dadsplaining, a Fatherhood podcast. You can join our Facebook group, Dadsplaining, a Fatherhood group. And you can reach us by email at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to tune into our Facebook page usually it's every Wednesday morning around 8 a.m. to watch the Facebook live stream like you could be doing right now. And we will see you next time.